Next game is Everton against Newcastle, 5:30 kickoff on Saturday at Goodison Park. I think the main talking point will be that it's the return for Anthony Gordon to his former club. Everton finally got off the mark in their last game against Crystal Palace, thanks to a brace from Dwight McNeil, and I think that'll be a massive relief for Sean Dyche, looking to sort of hopefully kick on from that, build some momentum, get the ball rolling. For Newcastle, they had a midweek game in the EFL Cup against Wimbledon, which they won 1-0. Main talking point from that would be Fabian Schär took penalties. I think with um, Isak out of this game, with Callum Wilson out, there's sort of gap to fill in that sense of who's going to take penalties. So I think it'll be Gordon's sort of number one choice. If he gets subbed around, let's say, 75th minute, Shaw will be the next in line, which I think is important. So that's a sort of lesson to take for the season going forward. Prior to that game against Wimbledon, they drew one each to Man City at St James's Park. So they were afforded a sort of bit of rotation midweek. We saw no Bruno Guimaraes, no Tonali, no Gordon, and Barnes was subbed up to 45 minutes. So we would expect those players to sort of return to the starting lineup. In terms of the injury report, we've got Isak set to miss out again with a fractured toe. Trippier too, not expected to start this game. Um, for Everton, it's better news. They've got pretty much full strength side now. I think they've got Branthwaite, who returned in the last game, Mikalenko and Jack Harrison, who came off the bench. Patterson is the only one who's sort of doubtful, so I think that's a big boost for Sean Dyche. Sort of got a full contingent now, and they sort of marked that with a win in the last game, so they'll be looking to build on. I do actually quite fancy Everton in this game. I think it has the potential to be quite chaotic, quite duel heavy. You've got two teams that don't play a very possession based football. So because of that, I think the target sort of has to be shots, tackles, and fouls. We get full markets, so we can target these stats with 365, but um, I've sort of taken a more player based approach, I would say, for this one. Um, if we look into Newcastle stats, I mentioned this last week, but they do struggle on the road compared to at home. They're sort of completely different side, home and away. And you can sort of make a case for Everton being the same as well. I think they look much more confident, much more assured at home on compared to being on the road. And that's reflected in their sort of shots stats. So if we look into the last 30 games, they're averaging 12.4 shots. Filtering that to home only, we see a slight uptick to 13.75. So straight away, that sort of becomes a sort of angle of interest. Um, However, it's worth noting that just because I think it's a good bet in the sense that it will come in, when we look at the Bet365 shot line, it does look very high. So I think it's more about identifying where the value is. So I would probably actually be inclined to avoid Everton shots in this scenario. However, I do have an alternative, and that is Newcastle goal kicks. Obviously, a stat that is correlated to shots. If we look into the head-to-head data, Newcastle had 9 goal kicks at home last season in this game against Everton, and 13 goal kicks at Goodison Park. You can get 9 goal kicks or more for Newcastle at 2.0, which I think is a nice angle. Sort of plays into the fact that Everton are very direct in their approach. They do favour long shots and crossing into the box, and in turn that sort of leads to sort of a lot of goal kicks, a disproportionate amount of goal kicks for their opponents. Sticking with shots, as I said, I like to target sort of players, and we've seen Dwight McNeil shift into a slightly different role over the last month or so, and that's him playing as a sort of advanced midfielder, more centrally as opposed to on the left wing. He scored a brace in his last game, obviously, against Crystal Palace, and he also scored against Aston Villa. So he scored 3 goals in 3 games. Should be full of confidence because of that. Um, But the overall change from Sean Dyche has been to integrate Iliman Ndiaye, obviously the new summer signing, into the team. And it was against Bournemouth actually, where he played Ndiaye on the left and McNeil centrally. So as a sort of attacking midfielder, a similar position to what we saw Decore play in last season. But instead of McNeil being like a box crasher, he's more of like sort of edge of the box creator, facilitator, that kind of thing. So he gets into good positions in the box. But the main sort of thing that draws me towards backing him is the fact that he's very, very central and he plays a lot around zone 14, sort of around the edge of the box and in the half spaces. Secondly, he has very good ball striking ability. As we saw against Crystal Palace, his sort of technique was incredible. And we did see that a lot last season. It was more from a sort of from a left wing position where he's looking to cross the ball in as opposed to shoot. When he's playing more centrally, obviously he's going to have a better opportunity to shoot, and I think that's reflected in his shot prices or shot on target stats since moving to the central role. So against Bournemouth, which was his first game in that position, he had two shots, one on target. Then against Leicester in the preceding game, he had four shots with one on target. Most recently, he had three shots, two goals, and two on target against Palace. Um, so since the move, obviously his shot on target price, his shot on target stats have been inflated. I think he's just one to target, should be full of confidence from the goal, and he's priced at 1.9 with 365 to register a shot on target. So given that standard in every game since moving to his new position, I just think that has to be a play. Also looking into the stats, his minutes are very, very secure. So he's only not played the full 90 in his last game, but that was with Everton leading. So obviously he was some from more defensive player. Um, so as I say, attacking midfielder on free kicks should be in for at least 80 minutes as a floor. At home to Newcastle struggle. They concede a lot of shots to their opponents. I think 1.9 is just an instant play. It just looks great value on the surface. As I said, I think it could be quite a duel heavy game. So I've got my eye on Newcastle to draw tackles from Tarkowski. Um, Tarkowski's been a sort of decent target over the course of last season because he gets in quite a lot of duels for a centre back. You don't really see centre backs as aggressive as he is. If we look into his head-to-head data against Newcastle, he made six tackles at St James's Park, whilst also being dribbled past once. So he attempted a tackle and didn't complete it, and he made two fouls as well. So he was heavily involved in the duels. Then at Goodison Park, he made two tackles and was dribbled past once. So two out of three tackles. Um, two tackles is currently priced at 1.66 with Bet365. Obviously a bit too short, but I do think even still that is very good value. And a sort of testament to that is this the same bet is 1.3 with Sky. So I like that as a sort of potential to double, or it could even be taken as a single. Um, especially when you consider that Tarkowski's landed at least two tackles in every home game so far this season. So he made two tackles against Brighton, but he was also booked in that game. He made five tackles against Bournemouth, which is obviously a great matchup, and two tackles against Crystal Palace. So landed in every home game, landed in both head-to-head games last season. I just like the matchup against Gordon as well. Um, if we look into the Man City against Newcastle game, Kanji had one out of two tackles completed. Ruben Diaz had one out of two tackles completed, um, also making two fouls. So those two were sort of quite heavily involved on the defensive front. Obviously, they didn't hit the two tackle mark, but that's obviously against Man City. Um, Newcastle saw a lot less of the ball than they will against Everton. The defenders will be a lot more involved in this game. So, um, as I say, I really, really like his tackle price is 1.66. I think just gonna wait for Ladbrokes to open up. I don't think they've opened up with a price yet. But if that is higher, if it is backable as a single, that would obviously be ideal. Now, obviously, I've mentioned McNeil sitting into a sort of attacking midfield role, um, and the sort of person who played in that role last season was Decore. Decore has been starting, so he's actually been shifted into a more defensive role, um, alongside new signing Oro Mangala. So in the last two games, Decore's played the full 90 as a holding midfielder, um, with Gay on the bench, Idrissa Gay on the bench, um, which is a good sign. I think I would sort of expect Idrissa Gay to be the starter, but if Decore is going to be playing the full 90 as a defensive midfielder against Newcastle, especially, ideal. So he's priced at 1.8 to make two fouls. Again, I think Sky have been quite slow to sort of pick up on a positional change. He started in the last two games as the holding midfielder, and you can see three fouls against Leicester, three fouls against Crystal Palace. I would argue Newcastle are a much better matchup than both of those for targeting sort of fouls in midfield because you've got Bruno Guimaraes who's drawn at least two fouls in every game, and he should sort of be in direct duels with Decore. In addition to that, you've got the likes of Joe Linton, Tonali, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes. You've got really, really good players for targeting fouls. Um, and Decore actually made the most fouls for Everton last season. He also ranked sixth out of all Premier League players for total fouls made, so it sort of is a testament to the aggression that he plays with. And it's worth noting that was in an advanced midfield role. So in a defensive midfield role, you sort of logically assume he gets in a lot more duels and therefore makes sort of fouls more attractive. So I think there's ladder potential there as well. If you consider two as 1.8 and he's landed three fouls in his last two games, could be one to sort of keep an eye on. I think he's 1.66 with Bet365 and 1.61 with Paddy, which I would say are sort of more fair prices. Um, so yeah, and that will be the last angle for Saturday. Moving on to